discuss semiconductor lasers today, which are to be found everywhere. The laser pointers, for example, are semiconductor lasers. So this is the most common form of laser, though they are low power lasers. The typical semiconductor laser has an output power of maybe at most a few tens of milliwatts. The laser pointer has an output power of only maybe about a milliwatt. So they are not powerful lasers, but very useful. And what is more interesting is that you can get light of and even infrared radiation of various different frequencies. A whole range of frequencies to choose from. So they are very, very useful. Now, so these are also continuous wave lasers. Remember that lasers are operationally of two types. One is pulsed laser, and the other type is the continuous wave or CW lasers. The ruby laser, for example, or the neodymium laser is a pulsed laser. You get output only for a small fraction of a millisecond or microsecond, and then you have a gap, and then you get another pulse. But the gas lasers and the semiconductor lasers operate continuously. So they are CW lasers. Now, the semiconductor lasers are also made of transparent materials like the ruby laser. But then why? Where is the main difference with one of the main differences with ruby or neodymium lasers is that the semiconductor lasers are excited by electric current like gas lasers and not by uh, shining light on these devices. See, remember that in the ruby laser, the excitation was by the light produced by a xenon flash lamp, but most of the light is wasted. Only even with uh, good uh, arrangements of reflectors, the efficiency is poor with ruby lasers. But with electrical excitation, the efficiency is much higher. So semiconductor lasers are excited electrically, like gas lasers. Now, remember that whatever may be the type of laser, the two main uh, factors or two main facts that must be true of any laser is that there has to be population inversion between an excited state and ground state, or between two states uh, between which a lasing action takes place. And secondly, that the equation that uh, tells you that this must be the case. In other words, the equation that uh, tells you whether there is amplification of radiation or gain of intensity within the medium is the equation due to Ladenburg. So Ladenburg's equation holds across all types of lasers. And number two is that uh, you have to make sure that the shallow Towns equation is also satisfied. So these two equations hold across all types of lasers, including semiconductor lasers. Now let us consider a semiconductor device. In figure 23.15, it is shown here in this slide. You see the band structure of a semiconductor diode. Semiconductor lasers are, by the way, semiconductor diodes essentially. So, so as you know, in semiconductor diodes, the energy of the electron is higher on the p side and lower on the n side. So In other words, there is a built-in potential which is low in the p side and high in the n side. So the potential is high in the n side, and p side has a lower potential, but because the electron has negative charge, the electron's energy is higher on the p side and lower on the n side. So that is what is shown in this diagram. The p side is elevated with respect to the n side. Now, in general, if you draw an energy level diagram or bands diagram of a junction diode, then you will draw the Fermi level EF at a height that is between the top of the valence band and bottom of the conduction band. So it lies in the forbidden gap. But if you dope both sides, the p side as well as the n side, very heavily, then the Fermi level lies within the valence band on the p side and within the conduction band on the n side, as shown here. So this is the band structure of a very heavily doped semiconductor diode. Now, however, though the conduction band has, even at zero temperature, a number of electrons, so these fill up certain states, and there is vacancy or holes on the p side, transitions from the n side to the p side do not take place because the Fermi level is the same everywhere. So the electron does not want to go to the p side because it doesn't have any reason to do so. The energy is everywhere the same, and so there is no reduction of its energy as it goes to the p side. So at equilibrium, in thermal equilibrium, and without any biasing, there is no movement of carriers or any net movement of carriers across the junction. So let us move to the next page. Okay. Now, okay, stop here. Now, suppose you apply a forward bias to this junction diode. Then what happens is that the Fermi levels become different in the two sides. The Fermi level goes up on the n side and goes down on the p side, and the difference in the positions of the Fermi levels is given by E times V. V is the applied forward bias. So now there is scope for electrons to jump down from the conduction band on the p side to the valence band on the n side, because electrons thereby lose energy, and that is the thing that happens in nature. Any object or particle which finds an opportunity to lose energy tends to do so. So electrons can jump down, and as they jump down from conduction band to the valence band, they give up energy which is radiated as photons, as shown here. H nu is the energy of the photon that is radiated, and the value of H nu is equal to the difference of the energy of the electron on the n side and the p side. Now, to find out whether the device can act as a laser, we have to see whether or under what conditions the Lydenberg requirement is satisfied. That is, there should be more electrons on the higher energy side and lesser number of electrons on the lower energy side. So that is the Latenberg condition. Now, so to find that, first of all, you have to find out the uh, occupation probability on these two sides. So on the uh, n side, the occupation probability of a level is given by FCEC. Now, here I would like to tell something. Normally, we denote the bottom of the conduction band by the symbol EC and the top of the valence band by EV. But in this book, they have denoted by EC the energy of the electron on the n side before it jumps down. So I do not prefer this notation. So please write EC equal to E2 in your notebook or pad if you have it in uh, hand. You just write down that EC is E2, the energy on the n side, and similarly, the expression for occupation probability on the p side is given by FVEV equal to 1 by 1 plus exponential of EV minus EFV by kBT. But then E small v is not the top of the valence band. It is the energy of the electron after it has jumped down to the valence band. So I would prefer to denote it by E1. That is normally the notation used. So what they have denoted by EC, we would consider to be the same as E2, and E small v is the same as E1. So don't confuse this with the bottom and the top of the bands respectively. So these are the occupation probabilities, and EFC and EFV are quasi-Fermi levels. That means they are Fermi levels only under the action or presence of the biasing voltage. If the biasing voltage is withdrawn, the Fermi level goes back to the same uniform value across the sample. Okay, now let us move to the lower portion of the page. Just scroll down. Shivshant, just scroll down to the equations that lie below. Yeah. Okay, slightly more. So, okay, stop here. Okay, stop. Now, so we are trying to find out the rate of transition to the from the upper level to the lower level, and this rate is given by equation 23.18, that is written as RE. On the other hand, the transition rate from lower to the upper level is written R small a, absorption. Now, can an electron jump up from the lower level that is denoted as E small v here to the upper level denoted as E small c here, or from E1 to E2? Notice that because of the Pauli principle, an electron can jump up to any upper level provided that level is empty. Okay, so the level from which it wants to jump has to have an electron there, so it has to be occupied. To which it wants to jump to must be unoccupied. The probability that the level is occupied is given by FVEV, whereas the probability that the upper level is unoccupied is given by 1 minus FCEC. Because FCEC is the probability that it is occupied. So 1 minus FCEC is the probability that it is not occupied. So the probability or the rate at which electrons will jump from lower to upper level will depend on the product of these two probabilities, FVEV and 1 minus FCEC. Also, it will depend, as we know, on the energy density of incident radiation. This is denoted by U nu here, which was denoted as rho nu in Lod's book. What was denoted as rho nu in Lod's book is denoted as U nu here. And then there is a BVC, which is the coefficient that we denoted by B1 earlier, 1, 2 to be precise. So what is BVC is the same as B12 in Lod's book or Einstein notation. And then finally you have a factor C in front. This C gives you the density of states. This is the density of states of the lower level from which electrons want to jump up to the upper level. So now it so happens that in semiconductors, because of the band structure and because of the fact that the momentum of the photon, which is absorbed by the electron when it wants to jump from lower to the upper level, is much lower than the already existing momentum of the electron, and therefore much lower than the momentum of the electron after it has jumped up to the upper level. In other words, the linear momenta of the electron before it jumps is the same as the linear momentum of the electron after it jumps. When you put in this condition, then you find that the density of states in the valence band must be equal to the density of states in the conduction band. These two must be equal to each other. And therefore, you have what is known as a joint density of states, and the expression for that, state it, I will later tell you where to find that, but just write it down if you have a sheet of paper beside you, that this joint density of states is given by twice mr whole thing to the power 3 by 2 by pi h cut square into, within brackets, h nu minus eg whole to the power half. Have you written it down? Yes?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat it?
I will read it out again. I will give you again.
Hello, sir.
Hello, the joint density of states, which is what C is given by, within brackets, twice mr whole to the power twice mr is to be multiplied by, within brackets, h nu minus eg whole to the power half. That is square root of h nu minus eg. This is the factor C. Where to find it? Yesterday I sent you some notes and you will find this in those notes. So we shall refer to these notes from time to time. That will be for completeness of this particular lecture. So you know what C is. C is called the joint density of states, and how you arrive at that expression is something that we need not go into now, but that tells you at least one thing, that the energy of the photon must be more than Eg. What is Eg? Eg is the band gap. Band gap is the energy difference between the bottom of the conduction band and the top of the valence band. So you can see this in figure 23.15. That was the previous page. In the previous page, you had this figure, so you know what Eg is. It is the band gap, and then h nu is the energy of the photon. So h nu has to be more than the band gap for this kind of transition to take place. So let's go to the next page. Yeah. So you have these expressions for stop here. Stop. Yeah. So you have 23.17 and 23.18 or 23.17 and 23.18 for the upward and downward emission rates. Now, in order that the emission exceeds the absorption, we have to have RE more than RA. So you have this condition PV into 1 minus FCC. This is basically the Ladenburg condition. Okay, in Ladenburg's formula, we require population inversion, but population inversion is required so that the downward takes place at a rate which is more than the rate at which upward transition takes place. So equation 23.19 tells you precisely that. So this is just the Ladenburg formula in a new notation. Now, if you substitute the expressions for FCC and FVEV, you will find that this tells you that EFC, that is the quasi-Fermi level on the N side, minus EFV, the quasi-Fermi level on the P side, must be more than EC minus EV, which is h nu. Now remember that EC minus EV is just E2 minus E1. EC minus EV is not EG. The notation is slightly misleading. So what is written as EC here, you should write as E2, and what is EV, you should write as E1. So EFC minus EFV has to be more than E1, which is equal to h nu. Now, when this condition is satisfied, you can have lasing action. In other words, stimulated emission can take place at a faster rate than the rate of absorption, and thereby you can have lasing action. Now, in the figure that you see on the right, a semiconductor laser or diode laser is shown. The diode laser, we shall come to the more elaborate diagram later, where you will see the detailed structure of the thing. The point is that there is the P-type layer and the N-type layer, and the biasing is such that, as usual, the P side is connected to the positive pole of the battery and the N side to the negative pole of the battery. But there is also sandwiched between these two layers another layer, and from this layer, it is basically the what they are denoting here is basically the depletion region, and from the depletion region, the emissions take place, because recombinations basically take place in the depletion region. What you mean by an electron jumping from upper level to a lower level is basically a transition that involves recombination of electrons and holes. So when electrons and holes recombine, this emission takes place, and as we know, most of these recombinations take place in the depletion region. So the shaded or rather the dashed lines, a pair of dashed lines there basically represents the depletion region between the P and N layers. But we shall come to much more elaborate diagrams later on. So if we can move to the next page now. So these are things that you already know, that this emitted radiation is coherent and so on. That is what they are saying here. Now, just stop here for a moment. Now, what type of material to use for such diode lasers? They use gallium arsenide phosphide. Gallium arsenide phosphide is essentially the material that is also used in the construction of light emitting diodes. But there are other types of light emitting diodes, for example, pure gallium arsenide or indium phosphide, and so on. As you may have heard, a few years ago, a Nobel Prize was awarded to the people who invented the diode that emits blue light. So this blue light emitting diode was escaping the discovery for a long time, and then two Japanese scientists and an American scientist invented the blue uh, light emitting diode, and that the material involved is indium phosphide, but that is a different story. So these laser diodes are made of gallium arsenide phosphide, as are most light emitting diodes. The difference between a light emitting diode and a diode laser is that the light emitting diodes emits radiation spontaneously. They emit spontaneously, and therefore the emitted radiation is not coherent radiation. In light emitting diodes, the condition 28 point the condition that we found in the previous page, that is 23.20 or 23.19 are not satisfied. The conditions 23.19 and 23.20 are not satisfied in light emitting diodes. So they emit radiation, but the emitted radiation is not coherent radiation. It is just spontaneous radiation. Each photon goes in its own way. There is no correlation between them. But once this condition 23.19 or 23.20 is satisfied, you can have the condition required for lasing action satisfied, and then you have this laser radiation coming out of the diode. Now, at this point, we will not immediately take up quantum well laser. Rather, we will just examine for a moment the structure of a light emitting diode. If you go to the other sent pages that I sent a few days earlier, just go on, move to pages from another book. This you know from previous classes. So what I'm trying to show you is the structure. Yeah, okay, slightly more. Yeah, here is, if you look closely inside a light emitting diode, you will find this kind of structure. This whole thing is enclosed within a bulb. It may be a glass bulb or it may be a plastic casing, but the whole thing is encased in a casing so that the materials do not get damaged by exposure to air. So you see the N-type region, which is a thick region, and the very thin P-type region, which is the region to the right of the dashed line. This thin strip between the dashed line and the solid line, on which are aluminium connectors written as aluminium grid for electrical connection. So it is between the layer on which aluminium studs uh, are made, and the N-type region is the P-type region, a very thin region which is just to the right of the dashed line. And then the p-type region is connected to the battery via this connecting wire, very thin, so as not to obstruct light. So this is what you will find if you look very closely inside a light emitting diode or something very close to this particular thing. The very thin wire may be replaced by a very arrow shaped something, but that also has to be very thin. So light is emitted at the junction between the n-type and p-type regions, and because the p-type region is very thin, the light can penetrate through the thin p-type region and come out. So that in the light emitting diode. So let us now go back to the previous pages. Okay, we go back to the previous pages. Yeah, here now. So we have said that light emitting diodes are common, or the type of diode lasers that were common a few years back, or maybe 10-15 years ago, consisted of N and P type gallium arsenide phosphide, and the depletion region between this N and P type layers, the lasing radiation was produced. Now, so these require the passage of a rather heavy amount of current. The current density across the depletion region has to be high. To reduce that, quantum well lasers were invented. In the quantum well laser, you have a number of layers. You have gallium aluminium arsenide, or sometimes written as aluminium gallium arsenide, AlGaAs, on two sides, and then you have sandwiched between these two a layer of gallium arsenide. These gallium aluminium arsenide or aluminium gallium arsenide layers are doped with N and P type impurities. Now, as it happens, the band gap in pure gallium arsenide is smaller than the band gap in gallium aluminium arsenide. So the band structure looks like what is shown in figure 23.18. So the bottom of the conduction band lies much above the bottom of the valence band in gallium aluminium arsenide, but the separation is much smaller than in the gallium arsenide. So so if you have a thin layer of gallium arsenide sandwiched between gallium aluminium arsenide layers, the band structure will be as shown, with the gallium arsenide layer forming a quantum well, because it is so thin, potential well, that you study in quantum mechanics. And so there are discrete energy levels here denoted as n equal to 1, n equal to 2, etc. layers in the conduction band side as well as in the valence band side in gallium arsenide layer. So the main point is not this energy levels, but the main point is that the separation between the bottom of the conduction band and the